Yeah, I define overfunctioning as carrying more than your fair share of the load in the relationship. It's doing for your partner what they can and should be doing for themselves. But I really like to focus on the emotional overfunctioning that a woman can do in a relationship where you are focusing on how well the relationship is going. You've got your finger on the pulse. You're paying attention to your partner's feelings, what they're needing, how they're doing, and you are doing all of that work on your own. Your partner, they're not offering that emotional reciprocity. They're not also keeping their finger on the pulse. They're not also bringing up the hard conversations. And so the experience of the overfunctioning woman in love is if I don't do it, it won't get done.
Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your Divorce Survival Guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back. And now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So this is a really important episode, I think, for so many of you and for most women. It's about overfunctioning and how it impacts our nervous systems and everything. We're exhausted, we're burnt out, we're wondering why our relationships feel like there's so much work. It's because probably we're overfunctioning. We want to prove our worth. We do so by this overfunctioning, right? Like if we don't do it, it just won't get done. The relationship, the parenting, the emotional glue that holds everything together, it's all our job and we are fucking exhausted. So I'm joined today by Dr. Ashley Southard. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 2 decades of experience who has lived the overfunctioning pattern in her own life, and she now helps women heal from it. We talk about what it really means to carry more than your fair share in a relationship and how that relentless push to keep things going, especially when your partner won't meet you halfway, can cost your sanity, your health, and your sense of self. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Ashley Southard. Thank you so much for coming onto my show, Dr. Ashley. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, okay, I want to start by just having you tell your story because it's one that our listeners will absolutely relate to. And for people who don't know you, who might not know you, how you got to doing what you're doing and essentially, but your story, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. Sounds great. So my name is Dr. Ashley Southard, and professionally, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Arizona. I have been practicing for over 22 years, and I specialize in trauma and relationships. So I work with individuals, couples, and families who are trying to find their way through challenging relationships, but looking at it through the lens of trauma and painful past experiences that they've been through that really might shape how they are experiencing the relationship and showing up in the relationship. So that's me professionally. And personally, I also have a story that really folds into the work that I do on the overfunctioning woman. I was married for over 20 years. I met my partner when I was just 18, just a baby. Did all of the things, dated for a while, got married, went and got my graduate degrees. We bought a house. We adopted the pets. We had the baby. And I thought I was doing everything that was going to lead to happiness. That's what we're told, to do all these things, and then you're going to be happy, live happily ever after.
Check.
Exactly.
Yep.
And as I was doing those things, I was finding that happiness was starting to be less and less and less. And it was happening at home. I wasn't feeling as happy in my relationship. parenthood really put a big strain on our relationship. So any foundations that were, or any cracks that were in the foundation before becoming parents that we could maybe overlook or it'll be fine, everything will work out.
Hmm.
Suddenly, the spotlight was on those cracks even more so as we were depending on each other more and more, needing each other in new ways, and now having this baby that we needed to tend to as well. So I kept just trying to make this better. And that was where this overfunctioning started. I thought, okay, maybe if I bring up the conversation again, this time it
Uh-huh.
will create some change and we'll be okay. Maybe if I get us into a really good couples therapist, then we will heal all of our issues and everything will be okay.
Mhm.
Anyway, I spent years trying more and new and different and more again and circling around these things over and over and over again. And things were actually getting worse.
Mhm.
And so what happened was I was getting more burnt out. I
Mhm.
was getting really resentful. I was
Mhm.
starting to not feel respect for my partner. And I got to a point where I was really disgusted actually by their unwillingness to really give the relationship what it needed to succeed. And so after agonizing over the decision, should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? I agonized for years. I finally hit a point where it became crystal clear to me that I had to leave in order to not only recoup my sanity, but my self respect and a future that would feel good and fulfilling and bright for me and also my daughter. So I made that
Yeah.
daunting decision and I started writing as a way to help myself, just writing
Mhm.
what this experience felt like and took to Instagram. And women started coming out of the woodwork saying, oh my God, that's me as well. I can relate to everything you're saying. I've never heard anyone describe it this way. And it was because I was just writing about the nitty-gritty emotional experience of what it's like to be in a really confusing one-sided relationship where the other person really isn't pulling their weight, but then you're blamed. And it's so
Mhm.
tricky and it's so hard to make sense out of. And I was writing about that. And a couple of years later, here we are. People are really relating to this concept of the overfunctioning woman in love and her
Yeah.
underfunctioning partner.
Yes, I love that. And one of the other pieces of your story that you didn't mention, but you do talk about, is that you actually developed lupus
I did.
in the relationship. And I can't tell you the number of women that I work with, that I hear from, that are listeners who find themselves with chronic illnesses that are, especially autoimmune issues because of the amount of stress
Yeah.
that is, the stress hormones that are coursing through their veins when they're overfunctioning, as you discuss, right? And your lupus, actually, you kind of healed yourself by getting out of your marriage, right?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It had been building for a very long time. And in terms of the markers getting worse and worse. And finally, then they were like, okay, we now know what this nondescript disorder is. And
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
remember sitting in my doctor's office and she's like, okay, you're playing with the big dogs now because my numbers had gotten so bad. And she started rattling off some pretty heavy duty medications I would need to take to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like her voice just faded to the background. And I remember something coming up inside of me like, no, 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 that's actually not what you need. Now, that may be what other people need. This is just my personal journey with it.
Exactly.
I knew
Yeah.
for me, I knew what the problem was. And so I started to figure out what the solution to that was. And it was, like you said, I was living in constant stress and silencing myself and stuffing my emotions. And the body
Mm-hmm.
cannot handle that. It
Mm-mm,
just cannot
mm-mm.
handle that. So I stopped doing those things. I did get out of it. And I went back to my doctor later, and my labs came back perfect. And she said, what did you do? And I said, I got a divorce. And she said, oh, yeah, I see that
That
a lot.
tracks. Yes, right. Good. I'm so glad. I mean, so often, right, women are living with these unspecified, often stress related autoimmune issues or whatever it is, right? And we want to be careful to say that we are not doctors, we're not diagnosticians, we're not saying that all autoimmune issues are going to be solved with this issue.
Yeah.
And one of the causes and sort of exacerbators of autoimmune issues is chronic stress. And so when you've got that much cortisol that's just constantly pumping, we can't combat it. And this is what happens. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying but it's certainly I'm not saying it's everything, but it's certainly something to look at. Right.
Yeah.
And I see it all the time. I see it all the time in my practice. Women are like, huh, weird.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am not chronically ill anymore.
Exactly. And I think the experience of overfunctioning is so stressful and so chaotic and so constant that, when all of that chaos and discord gets shoved down into your body, because when you try to talk about it, it gets you nowhere. When
Mhm.
you try to do something about it in your relationship, it gets you nowhere. So your body becomes what I call the shock absorber for all of
Mhm.
this
Yes.
dysfunction. And our body isn't designed to do that. And so it does have to manifest in some way, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we really do need to be able to live in peace. Getting out of overfunctioning can bring you peace.
So, okay, we've been talking about overfunctioning, which is what you've sort of labeled this phenomenon, which
Yeah.
most people listening are going to really relate to. So, how do you define overfunctioning?
Yeah, I define overfunctioning as carrying more than your fair share of the load in the relationship. It's doing for your partner what they can and should be doing for themselves. Now, there's a lot of layers to overfunctioning, a lot of types of overfunctioning. We could look at the physical overfunctioning where you're doing things for them that they can do for themselves. But I really like to focus on the emotional overfunctioning that a woman can do in a relationship where you are focusing on how well the relationship is going. You've got your finger on the pulse. You're paying attention to your partner's feelings, what they're needing, how they're doing, and you are doing all of that work on your own. Your partner is
Mm-hmm.
supporting you in that effort. They're not offering that emotional reciprocity. They're
Mm-hmm.
not also keeping their finger on the pulse. They're not also bringing up the hard conversations. And so the experience of the overfunctioning woman in love is if I don't do it, it won't get done.
It won't get done. That's right.
Yeah. I
That's
don't hold it all together, it's all going to fall apart. You
that's right.
feel the burden of the entire relationship on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Been there.
Yeah,
More than
exactly.
once.
And I contrast that with the partner who is under functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while
Mm-hmm.
you're doing all the work, they're not doing nearly enough to keep this relationship going. And then over functioning prompts you to compensate, to pick up their slack, to bridge the gap. So every time they under function, you do more. And then they do
Yes.
less, and then you do more, and round and round you go until years or decades later, you have nothing left in you.
A lot of this feels like certainly a patriarchal distinction, right? Because we have been conditioned as women to do all the work, all the emotional labor, all the mental load. And, men get to kind of ride on the coattails of that. And that is definitely part of our cultural conditioning. Do
Yes.
you see this? Do you see a difference in this in same-sex relationships or other sort of gender sort of pairings? Or do you see this mostly as a sort of cis hetero issue?
The majority of people that I've worked with are cis hetero, and
Mhm.
so I can speak to that, and that's also been my personal experience. I do think, though, that we can also talk about masculine and feminine energy, and that
Mhm.
crosses gender lines.
Mhm.
You can have a same-sex relationship where one person carries more of that masculine energy and one person carries more of that feminine energy. So we could look at it through that lens and see that it doesn't necessarily have to apply to gender. We can certainly see this dynamic in same-sex relationships and heterosexual relationships. But I do think that women are definitely acculturated into being the emotional caretaker in the relationship. I especially think that our generation of women who are in their 40s and 50s now, who were raised by moms coming out of the women's movement, we were raised to believe that we could do and be anything we wanted,
We
that
can have
we
it all.
yeah, we can crush it at work. We can be a stay-at-home mom if we want to. We can be a working mom if we want to. We can be some hybrid of that. We can do whatever we want, which is amazing and wonderful. I'm so grateful I was raised that way. But we weren't also at the same time raising the boys to believe that they could crush it at home, that they could be very emotional and that's a strength, that they could really dial into their relationship and that's amazing. We weren't doing that. So we were, quote unquote, empowering women to be able to do it all, but we weren't equally empowering the men to do the same at home. So women were going off to work and crushing their careers and then coming home and doing the full-time mom and relationship load. And so we now have a generation of women who have done it all. And just because we can doesn't mean we want to, nor that we should. We're burnt out, we're tired, we're fed up, and we're done.
Amen, sister. And then the men are going, what happened?
Right.
What happened? Everything was fine. What I always say, right? And what I always say to my clients is that, like, yeah, of course they're not interested in changing this. It works for them.
Of course.
They're getting absolutely everything they ever needed. They get a mom, they get a wife, they get like all the things, all the roles that we play. They're psyched to have us in.
That's right. We keep it very comfortable for them. Mm-hmm. And that is part of our work to do, is to recognize that overfunctioning has us trying to get them to change. We want them to step up. And we think if we tell them again, we think that if we nag them again, we think that if we forgive them again, then they'll go, oh my gosh, I can see all that you're doing. Let me reciprocate. No, that's not how this is going to work. If they're comfortable, they're not going to change. That is human nature. Mm-hmm. So it is our task to see that we have to step back from doing so much for them and bridging that gap and protecting them from the natural consequences of their immature and irresponsible choices and actions. And let them experience that. And we've got to step back and take care of ourselves, focus on our feelings and our needs, and let them be responsible for themselves, and then see what they do with that. In some cases, they'll step up. In most cases, they won't. And then we have to decide if that works for us or not.
So, right. Yes. Well, we already know it doesn't. So
it doesn't, right.
And I think what we have we have to be willing to sit with the consequences of recognizing that they actually don't care about us to the degree that they say that they do, if they're not willing to step up and understand that the way it works. I always say that if a relationship isn't working for one person, it's not working. So if I come to my partner and say, I am overfunctioning and you are underfunctioning, and I am going to stop now, and they don't step up, what am I willing to do about that? Yeah. So you say that an overfunctioning woman needs their partner to underfunction. What do you mean by that? Ouch.
One, isn't it?
Ew.
I know. But our power is in understanding this. So we do need an underfunctioning partner, because overfunctioning is steeped in psychology that says, I have to prove my worth. I have to earn their love. I have to work hard to get what I want. I can't just be and be given to. I have to earn, right? And that typically is going to come from our childhood experiences, because these are subconscious beliefs that we don't even know we're living by until you listen to discussions like this and go, holy cow, yes, that's so true. And our subconscious beliefs typically get formed in the first 10 years of life. So think back to the relationship dynamics you had when you were a kid, primarily with your parents or your primary caregivers. And were you in a dynamic with a parent where you thought you had to work hard to get their attention, or to keep them happy, or to make them love you? Some of us will find somewhere in there like, yep, that's what it felt like, right?
Yep.
So we learn, okay, I have to work really hard to get love. They're not just going to freely give it to me. So then we take that subconscious belief, unbeknownst to us, and we go into adulthood and we find a partner. And we are going to be subconsciously attracted to a partner who's going to recreate and fulfill that belief that we have to work hard to get their attention and their love. And hello, underfunctioning partner, because that's exactly what they set up for us. They sit back with their feet up and kind of let us run around like a chicken with our heads cut off, trying to get them to give us the attention or engage in the relationship or have the conversation or help us feel loved. And that fulfills this subconscious belief that we hold that we have to work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So our
Mm-hmm.
healing is in healing those old wounds and those old beliefs so that we no longer work hard for love
Yes.
and attention. We now require generous, giving love that says, I am here and I love you and I want to do this for you. And we don't have to work for that. We just have to be our wonderful selves, and that's enough.
That's right. I love that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, I want to talk about that transitional period, that healing period. Like, how do we get to be that person, right? Because that's going to be the next big question. So we will be right back. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure about your next step in the divorce process? You don't have to do this alone, my love. If you're listening to this podcast, you already know that I am a pioneer in the divorce coaching industry, and that for over a decade, I've helped hundreds of women navigate some of the toughest decisions of their lives. Until recently, I only worked with clients in a long-term private capacity. But I know that not everyone needs or has the ability to commit to long-term coaching. Sometimes you just need clear, focused strategies to move forward. That's why I now offer targeted 3-session strategy packages designed to give you the clarity, direction, and confidence you need without the long-term commitment. Whether you're deciding whether to stay or go, uncovering and healing from abuse, or dealing with a high-conflict divorce, I will help you create a clear roadmap, develop a plan to work with your attorney, saving you time and money, and help you navigate difficult conversations with ease. All coaching is done on Zoom, so no matter where you are, we can work together. No consultation call is needed. Just fill out a quick questionnaire and I'll get you all set up. Head on over to kateanthony.com/strategy and take the first step toward a stronger, more empowered future today. That's kateanthony.com/strategy. And I'll talk to you soon. Divorce is overwhelming. I know. I've been there. That's why I created a set of tools to help my private coaching clients navigate the process with clarity and confidence. Now those same tools are available to you in the Divorce Survival Guide Resource Bundle, a collection of over 20 documents to support you at every stage. Inside, you'll find things like how to tell your kids you're getting a divorce, a comprehensive parenting plan template, questions to ask when hiring an attorney, tools for processing relationship grief, plus my divorce planner to track everything from finances to custody arrangements, and 20 more resources I can't even get into listing here. These are the exact resources I created for my clients, now available for anyone going through divorce. You don't have to do this alone. Get the bundle today at kateanthony.com/bundle. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about the unconscious desire but the unconscious urge and pull towards someone who is an underfunctioner based on our childhood that creates us as the overfunctioning adult, right? You identified that there is this piece, there's this, like, we want to become this person who sort of meets someone on an even playing field who is also meeting us on that same playing field and choosing us because we're awesome. And then there's this reciprocity, right? But for most people, that there's this big gap between being the overfunctioner and being the person who can be ready to receive and attract that equality.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you help women heal really from the overfunctioning?
Yeah. Well, you used a really important word, which is receive.
Mm-hmm.
And overfunctioning women, we are master givers. We will give away everything we possibly have until we have nothing left. But we're really terrible receivers.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really hard time with receiving attention and receiving generosity and, quite frankly, receiving love without feeling like we have to do something to earn it or feeling like we have to reciprocate right away.
Mm-hmm.
So The first step that I encourage women to do is to really start to get very clear on how they're overfunctioning. We can't change something we don't really see and understand. Looking at your overfunctioning and noticing where you are trying to bridge the gap and compensate for your partner, and start to step back and just kind of give them some space to function. Let
Mm-hmm.
them remember things or not.
Mm-hmm.
Let
That's
them
right.
initiate the conversation or not. And the hardest thing about this isn't so much the stepping back, it's the tolerating that space where you're waiting to see what they choose to do with it. That's really hard. That's where our anxiety wants to shoot through the roof. And that's when we want to step in and overfunction, because if we
Yeah.
step back and we watch what they do with it, we might see some things we really don't want to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I recommend, and I assume you would agree, right? That we don't just step back and cross our arms. It's like we're not setting a trap.
Right.
First, right, we are communicating our discomfort, our need for support, right? We're first identifying the issue that we have and then saying, and so because of that, I'm going to be doing X, I'm going to be stepping back. And then you're seeing what they're going to do, right? We're not setting a trap. I think it's important because women like to be like, oh, okay, fine. Well, I'm just not going to do anything and we'll see what he does. It's like, well, that's not really fair or relational,
Right.
right?
Right. I think out of our own integrity, we want to be able to communicate what we're doing. I think the reality is it's probably not really going to matter if you say something or don't say something, because oftentimes under functioning partners don't really take us all that seriously. They kind of, hear what they
Yeah.
want to hear, blow us off when they want to blow us off. But out of our own self-respect, we know that our side of the street is clean, if you will. We're communicating,
Mhm.
we're doing our part. What they do with that is what they do with that.
That's
So
exactly
yeah, we're
right.
going to
Yeah.
step back, and then we're going to tolerate the discomfort of seeing what they choose to do with that space. And that is a huge piece of healing the overfunctioning. And this may be a very long process. A lot of women ask me, like, how long does this take before you get clarity on what you want to do with their choices? And it could be months, it could be years. For me, it was many, many years.
Yeah.
I'd step back, I'd watch what they do with it. I didn't like it. I would feel those feelings. I would try to talk about it with them. It wouldn't go anywhere. I'd step back, and I would do that so many times because I really needed to feel like I've turned over every stone that I know how to turn over to try to give this a shot at working.
Yeah.
And it's okay. I really encourage women to move at whatever timeline works for you. Don't pressure yourself. I know we can get so caught up in the decision. Should I stay or should I leave? And, we can agonize over that for a long time, and that's okay. And it can take a long time. But within that question, I want you to ask yourself, what can I do today to support my own healing from overfunctioning? I can stay in
Mm-hmm.
this relationship today, and I can still work on my own healing. I can step back today. I can say no today, right? And every time we do something seemingly small, I say seemingly because none of this is small, but in that moment, it can feel like, well, that was a small step back, or that was a small example or a small win. But all of those add up to something really powerful. And when you do these small stepping back steps enough times, you build courage inside of you. You see that you can handle it. And you
Mm-hmm.
see that they can have a temper tantrum and you actually can be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
you see that you feel more peaceful when you disengage from the temper tantrums or from the defensiveness. You start to discover a new version of you who can handle this a lot better than you thought you could at the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
it's from that place where you're better equipped to make that bigger decision. You see if they're stepping up, and then it becomes clear that this relationship is savable, or you see them not stepping up and you are feeling more and more powerful within yourself to make a decision and be on your own and handle that change. And then at some point, something happens and it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready. On. It
Yes.
actually feels scarier to stay in the relationship and in this dynamic than to get out of it.
Yes, yes, yes. And, this is why I have a program called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And the first chunk, the first third of it is all about the self work that you're talking about because we're taking the focus off of them. right? Because we've been agonizing for sometimes decades over whether what they're doing is bad enough. Does this rise to the level of, oh, did they shift a millimeter to right into functioning? Like right? No, it's about us. It's about right, because when we actually begin to feel that growth of tolerance and self-esteem and self-respect, right, that, or not growth of tolerance, like we're not looking to have more tolerance for that, but for the discomfort of, oh shit, we're sort of shoring ourselves up for being able to make the decision.
And creating a new version of ourselves who is no longer over functioning and who says, like, this doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really empowering. And when you bring that version of you into the decision, if you do decide to end things, like, look out.
That's right. That's right. And, you and I can attest to that. Look out. Look out. And I love the idea of, you're building a new version of yourself that's able to say, this doesn't work for me. Because I know when I was in it, there was no such language because there was no me
Right.
in that relationship, right? When you're over functioning, there is no me.
Right.
And so the idea of creating yourself such that you can even identify as a self to begin with, then be able to say, oh, this doesn't work for this self that I am now deeply in touch with and grounded in, right? Like that's the first step is the identification of the capital S self.
Right. And that self is finally starting to believe that she is deserving and worthy of love that feels generous and attentive.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite part, emotionally safe.
Yes.
Right? A love that doesn't leave you wondering, feeling anxious, feeling alone. There's nothing worse than being in a relationship and feeling alone.
There is no loneliness like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, this new version of yourself really believes that she is deserving of quality love. And once you cross that threshold, like there is no going back. Once you see that you really are deserving of those things, like feel it in your bones, there's no going back. You can't unsee it. And your partner will either get with the program or they won't, because there is no more in between that you will tolerate. It is once you connect with yourself.
So it's like, yeah, right. It's juicy. It's really juicy. So what you're talking about is what you identify as a self-restored woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, she is juicy and she's powerful.
She is.
Are there any other sort of traits of a self-restored woman that you want to share with our listeners?
I think she's a wonderful receiver. I think she has finally learned that she doesn't have to work her tail off to get breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
She deserves a feast, that she will receive that, and that she deserves a love that just wants to shower her in generosity because she does the same in return. Mm-hmm. It's not this selfish one-sided thing. It's not the flip side of the coin that we're talking about. It's about saying, I bring all of myself to the relationship, and now I receive a partner who brings all of themselves to the relationship. And that's what I deserve. And as a self-restored woman, I'm no longer questioning if that's asking for too much. I just know, like, that's what I need. That's what feels good and juicy to me. And that's what I deserve. So that's it. That's what I expect. And they can either meet that standard or not. But I'm no longer questioning myself. I'm confident. I'm authentic. And I'm self-respecting. I have standards now. I expect them to be met. And I say that in a loving way, but these standards are very appropriate and I expect them to be met because that's what healthy, mature love is. I want a partner, not a child. I want to be a partner, not a parent.
That's right. I have a child.
Yeah, I want to be a parent to my child, and that's it.
And that's it. Right. Exactly. Yes. 100%. I remember when I left my marriage, I was like, we had 2 cats and a dog, and the cats were my ex's. Like he brought them into our marriage and they were on their last legs by the time we got divorced. And the dog he had adopted kind of without me, like my baby had passed away. My dog baby had recently died, and I was not ready for another dog. And he went out and got another dog, so I didn't feel like emotionally bonded to that dog. And I just thought, you know what? Everyone's like, "Are you going to get another animal or whatever?" Because I decided that I was going to leave those, and I was like, you know what? No, I have been caretaking a child, a man child, a dying dog, two dying cats for over a decade. When I get out of this relationship, I'm going to caretake my child 50% of the time. I mean, 100% of the time, because, you're never not a mother, and me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for as long as it takes for me to feel like I can actually, caretake somebody else. And it's going to be an animal or a child and not a grown ass man.
You're better than me because I'm only at the houseplant level. That's about all.
Yeah. Well, I have been divorced for over 15 years. So I am now at the 3 cats and a dog
The cup has been
stage.
refilled. Yeah.
Everything has been refilled, and I'm in a relationship that is everything that you're talking about, right? Just such incredible, reciprocal, deep, deep, intimate love, where we're both caretaking each other in really like special and beautiful ways, and, not feeling resentful or, everyone. And we both feel like really like our cups feel like continually filled by each other.
Right. Right.
Crazy
and you feel
town.
like you're on their radar and they care about you. And
yeah, always.
Your experience in this relationship matters to them. And if you come to them with something you trust that they may not understand it yet, they may not love this conversation, but because it matters to you, it matters to them.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so
I
they
mean, beyond. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
That space that we were talking about between, deciding to leave or even just working on yourself, and getting to the place where we're at now, I call the great rest, where, your nervous system
I love that.
is fried. I mean, you have really been living in fight or flight this whole relationship.
That's right.
So when you start to come out of it, whether you're coming out of the actual relationship or coming out of the overfunctioning, but still in the relationship, most women are going to experience this massive letdown in their nervous system where they are exhausted. They could sleep for days or months or years. They have very little tolerance for just day-to-day adulting because they are so spent. And when you finally kind of fall into that place, you just want to hibernate.
That's right.
And it's hard. It's hard to still get up and go to work and parent and do all the things that adulting requires of us. And somehow we do, because that's just what we do. But I always like to let women know, brace for that. It's going to be a while, a year, 2 years maybe, where you just need a lot of rest. You need things to be quiet. You need things to chill. I remember decorating my home in all neutral colors. I just needed not even color stimulation in my environment. And I spa music or just open the windows and listen to the birds. I just needed this sense of peace, and I needed it in huge doses to make up for all of the chaos and mayhem that I was experiencing when I was in the overfunctioning.
Yes. I love that. The great rest. I think some of us will move towards some unhealthy coping mechanisms. I know I did. My alcohol intake was, steadily rose through that period. And, now I know it's like, oh, look at those unhealthy coping mechanisms. There was a lot of shopping. There was a lot of doing. There was a lot of drinking, right? When I think what I really needed was a lot of fucking rest. It took me a minute to figure that out.
Well, yeah. And it takes a minute to kind of undo the overfunctioning thinking, which is there's always something to do. I should be doing something. I need to be productive, right? And to really let ourselves be in bed or be on the couch and watch TV and not get things done that's a big shift for us. So yeah, the in between of that can be kind of messy and turbulent and rocky, and just be really gracious with yourself and compassionate with yourself, and you will find your way.
And I think had I had information, like we're sharing today, when I was going through this in, 2010, probably might have done things differently. But, now we all kind of know better, and we understand these, and we can name it for other people so that they don't have to make the mistakes I made. Right. So if somebody is listening to this and they are identifying now as an overfunctioning woman, what are some of the steps that they can take to start off?
Well, I would encourage them to get to know their overfunctioning very well. And if they want, they can go to my website and grab a free quiz, and it asks you a bunch of questions about how you might be overfunctioning in your relationship, which I think gives you just a good insight into what it might look like for you, and really get to know your overfunctioning, because you've been so focused on their underfunctioning, but we can't control them and we can't change them. And one more conversation isn't going to get them to wake up. They will wake up when they want to wake up. So what we can do is focus on our side of the street. We can focus on our overfunctioning and really get to know how we are compensating for them, how we are protecting them from their own natural consequences. And we can start to take those baby steps back in ways that help our nervous system get comfortable with this change. And I think that is such a powerful step in this process. And then learning to tolerate that anxiety when you step back and you're waiting to see what they do with it, or you see what they do with it and you don't like it. And learning to tolerate that can be, sometimes we have to leave the space. We have to leave the house for a while because their energy is just, it's all over the place and it's affecting us. So we need to leave, or we need to get some help. Maybe we call a girlfriend, maybe we start therapy. We can do things for ourselves to regulate our nervous system so that we can learn to be okay, even when our partner isn't okay. We can be okay and take care of ourselves while they're spinning out, while they're having a temper tantrum, while they're blaming us, while they're spinning it around and making it our fault, while they take no accountability. We don't have to engage in that.
That's right.
We can say, you know what? You're welcome to have a temper tantrum, and I'm welcome to go take myself to the coffee shop and read a book.
That's right. So you mentioned a quiz on your site. What is your website, and where can people find that quiz and all of your work?
So you can just go to drashleysouthard.com. The quiz is right there on the homepage. Also follow me on Instagram. I post regularly, and I have a ton of content. I do a lot of carousel slides with pretty deep dives into a lot of the nuances of this experience, what it feels like to be an overfunctioning woman. And there's a wonderful community of 75,000 women on there, and we're all in this together. So go check it out, binge on the content. It will start to open your eyes, and don't pressure yourself to do anything with this content, right? That's where our overfunctioning brain wants to take us. Oh my God, I know better now.
What do I do? Oh,
better.
yeah, right. Yeah.
And you don't. You can just marinate in these new ideas. Let yourself get comfortable with this concept of overfunctioning and what it might look like for you. And let yourself just absorb the content and feel validated and feel seen. You're in a relationship where you don't feel seen and understood. But you can go to my Instagram page and finally feel seen and understood. Just let yourself be in that without any pressure on yourself to do something with it or make a decision with it. Once you sit in this content long enough, you will naturally start to want to make some changes, and they'll be small, but small changes add up to something big eventually.
I love it. drashleysouthard.com. Everybody head on over there and to the Instagram, because there is a lot of great content. I was sort of binging on it this morning in preparation for this interview. I was like, oh, this stuff is good. Thank you so much, Ashley. I so appreciated connecting with you and bringing your message to my audience. I think it's just really great stuff.
And I hope they all find it helpful and empowering.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.